All right, so get ready. We're going deep today, deep into the world of neurology, but with a bit of a twist.
No, twist, huh?
Yeah, we're going to be looking at how our brains, you know, that incredible network of neurons, how they shape our sense of self, our identity.
Fascinating stuff. And we're not just going to be talking textbook neuroscience here, are we?
Nope. We're going to be diving into real-life case studies and trying to figure out how our brains construct, well, our realities.
I like it. Using real stories to understand this complex machine.
Exactly. And our guide for this wild ride is going to be the brilliant neurologist Oliver Sacks.
Of course, Oliver Sacks, a legend.
Right? Specifically, his book, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. I mean, even the title alone, right, makes you wonder what's going on in our heads.
It's a classic. And
Yeah.
Sacks was a master at telling these captivating stories of his patients with these unusual neurological conditions.
He really was. And through these stories, he sort of unveils the complexities of, well, the human experience and what happens when our brains decide to throw us a curveball.
Those curveballs can be pretty fascinating, can't they? Revealing so much about how we work.
Absolutely. So should we just jump right in?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's start with the case that inspired the book's title, Dr. P, a gifted musician who developed this strange condition called visual agnosia.
Agnosia. Now that is a fascinating phenomenon.
It really is.
And it's not about, poor eyesight or anything. People with agnosia, they can see perfectly well. The issue is recognizing and interpreting what they're seeing.
Like their eyes work fine, but their brain has trouble making sense of the information.
Exactly.
Wow.
Sacks described Dr. P as being able to see, like, the fine details. The color of a flower, the shape of a doorknob.
No.
But he couldn't put those pieces together to perceive the object as a whole. So imagine seeing a jumble of lines and colors instead of, say, a face.
I can't even imagine. That must be so disorienting.
It is. And this wasn't just with, inanimate objects either. Dr. P struggled to recognize his own students, even his wife.
His own wife.
Yes. The part of his brain responsible for, making sense of visual information was somehow disrupted.
So it wasn't his eyes, it was his brain that couldn't piece together who he was seeing.
Exactly.
Which leads to that very poignant scene where Dr. P is leaving his office and tries to put on his hat.
Oh, I remember this.
But instead of grabbing his hat, he reaches for his wife's head.
It's such a striking image, and it speaks volumes about how layered perception really is. We tend to think we see the world objectively,
Right.
but our brains are constantly interpreting, constructing meaning from all that sensory input we receive.
We don't just passively see, we actively interpret.
Yes. And Dr. P's case shows us what can happen when that interpretation process, goes off the rails.
So what we perceive as reality, it's actually brain-generated interpretation.
Precisely. A very personal interpretation.
It's both amazing and, well, a little unsettling, isn't it?
It is. It challenges our assumptions about, the nature of reality itself, and raises questions about how much of our experience is really shaped by our own individual brains.
Like how much of seeing is actually happening in our heads, not just in our eyes.
Exactly. It's a question that, philosophers and scientists have been grappling with for centuries. And Dr. P's case provides this really fascinating window into that very question.
Okay, so let's move on to another case that really throws a wrench into our typical understanding of the self. This time, it's about Christina,
The disembodied lady.
Yes, the disembodied lady.
Christina's story really highlights the crucial role of something called proprioception.
Proprio what?
Proprioception. It's often called our sixth sense.
Our sixth sense.
It's the sense of our body's position in space. So it's how we know where our limbs are without having to look at them.
Oh, so like I know my hand is here, even though I'm not looking at it.
Exactly. It's what allows us to move gracefully, coordinate our actions without constantly monitoring our bodies.
I never really thought of it as a sense before, but it makes sense.
And Christina, poor Christina, she lost this sense completely due to a very rare neurological condition.
Completely lost the sense of where her body was in space.
Yes. Imagine waking up one morning and suddenly you feel like you're floating with absolutely no awareness of your physical body.
It's almost impossible to even comprehend.
I know. And Sacks describes her initial terror and confusion. She felt like her body had simply vanished, like she was and I quote, disembodied wraith.
It must have been terrifying.
It was. And her experience, it reveals how deeply intertwined our sense of self is with our physical embodiment. We don't just inhabit our bodies.
Right.
Our bodies are integral to who we are.
We are our bodies in a way.
In a way, yes. It's fascinating, though, that Christina, she was eventually able to adapt
Adapt, but how if she couldn't feel her body?
by relying very heavily on her vision. So she learned to move and function in the world. But that feeling of disembodiment, it never really went away.
Wow. So she could move, but she never felt like she was back in her body.
Exactly. And it raises a profound question, what does it truly mean to inhabit our bodies? If we can function without that felt sense of embodiment,
Hmm.
what does that say about the nature of the self? It's a question that, philosophers have been debating for centuries, and Christina's case provides this real-world example of this mind-body dilemma.
It makes you wonder about the limits of our language even. When we talk about the mind and the body as if they're like separate things.
I agree. It's a false dichotomy in many ways. The brain, the body, the environment, they're all in constant interaction, shaping our experiences and ultimately our sense of self.
Okay, so we've talked about vision and perception and now this sense of feeling our bodies in space. Let's shift gears a bit and explore this fascinating world of memory and how it contributes to our sense of identity. Sachs, of course, has several cases that delve into this.
Oh, he does. So many fascinating cases about memory.
But let's start with Mrs. O.C., who had a peculiar form of epilepsy.
Epilepsy, a neurological disorder characterized by seizures. But in Mrs. O.C.'s case, her seizures, they would trigger these incredibly vivid, almost nostalgic experiences.
What do you mean, like flashbacks?
More than flashbacks, she would be transported back to her childhood in Ireland.
Back to her childhood through a seizure.
Yes. Sachs describes her, smelling the peat fires of her childhood home, hearing her mother's voice, and feeling this profound sense of peace and belonging.
So these weren't just like vague memories. She was really back there in a way.
Right. What's fascinating is that these weren't just vague memories. She was reliving these experiences in incredible detail, as if they were happening in the present moment.
Incredible. And did this upset her, having these seizures that sent her back?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But she actually refused treatment for her seizures.
Use treatment. Why?
Because she found these nostalgic trips so comforting, so healing. She looked forward to them.
Wow. It really speaks to the power of memory, doesn't it? And how it can shape our emotional state.
It does. And it highlights the complexities of treating neurological conditions, especially when, the subjective experience of the patient might not align with what we typically consider normal or, desirable.
Makes you wonder about the nature of these seemingly lost memories, doesn't it? Like,
Wow.
are they always there, lurking beneath the surface, just waiting for the right trigger to resurface?
That's a question neuroscientists are still trying to figure out. We know that memories aren't stored like files on a computer.
Right.
They're dynamic, they're constantly being reconstructed and reinterpreted each time we recall them.
It's amazing how much we still don't know about memory.
It is. And it raises the question of whether we could access these hidden memories through other means, like perhaps through meditation or other techniques that alter our brain states.
That's a thought-provoking idea, something to ponder.
Definitely something to explore further. It really is. Makes you think, doesn't it? Like, what if we could unlock those hidden memories?
Yeah, like some kind of key to our past selves. But speaking of hidden memories, there's this other case that really gets to the heart of what memory means for our identity. Jimmy G.
Ah, Jimmy G, a man trapped in a perpetual present?
Exactly. He lost his ability to form new memories because of Korsakoff syndrome. It's often caused by chronic alcohol abuse.
Jimmy's story is heartbreaking. He was intelligent, engaging, but
But
he had this profound gap in his experience of time and, himself. Sachs described him as living in a perpetual present, unable to remember what had just happened moments before.
like every moment was brand new for him.
Yes. And Sachs wrote about how Jimmy would, introduce himself to the staff multiple times a day, no recollection of their previous encounters.
Like he was meeting them for the very first time over and over.
Exactly. His short-term memory was severely impaired. Imagine living each moment as if it were brand new, with absolutely no connection to your past experiences. It'd be like waking up every few minutes as a different person.
That's a terrifying thought, to lose that sense of continuity of self.
It is, and it challenges our understanding of what it means to be a continuous self, doesn't it? We think of our memories as these threads that weave together the tapestry of our lives.
Right, the threads of our experiences making up who we are.
But without those threads, those memories, who are we then?
It's a profound question. And there's this other interesting detail about Jimmy G's case.
Oh, absolutely. There's always something more with Sachs cases.
Like, Even though Jimmy couldn't form new personal memories, he could still access certain types of memories, like facts, historical events.
Ah, yes. A crucial distinction. It highlights the difference between what we call semantic memory, or general knowledge of the world, and episodic memory, or personal recollection of events. Jimmy's episodic memory, the memory of his own experiences, was severely impaired.
So he knew things, but he couldn't remember things that happened to him.
Precise.
So to have a sense of self, a sense of, continuity through time, it relies heavily on those personal memories, those unique experiences that shape who we are.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If a life without personal memories, is it a life without a true sense of self? Are we just a collection of facts and knowledge, or is there something more to our identity, something that resides in those stories we tell ourselves about our past?
It's a deep philosophical question. And Jimmy's case gives us this powerful way to look at it.
It does, and it's not just about memory loss. Sachs also explores cases where people's bodies change dramatically, and these changes, they lead to shifts in their sense of self.
You're thinking of Ray, right? That man with Tourette syndrome.
Exactly. Ray's case challenges our ideas about what's considered normal and how we adapt to our own unique, neurology.
Tourette's is a neurological condition characterized by involuntary movements and vocalizations, what we call tics. And these tics, they can be incredibly disruptive and social isolating.
They can be very challenging, yes.
But what was so fascinating about Ray, to me at least, was that he didn't try to suppress his tics. He saw them as a part of who he was, and he even found ways to incorporate them into his life.
Sachs described Ray as a remarkable ping pong player. He realized that his quick reflexes, which were partly driven by his tics, actually gave him an advantage in the game.
Like his Tourette's became his superpower.
In a way, yes. It's a great example of how our brains can adapt, find ways to turn what might be seen as a weakness into a strength.
It's all about perspective.
It really is. Instead of viewing his Tourette's as a burden, Ray found a way to embrace it, even use it to his advantage. A powerful message about the resilience of the human spirit.
Definitely. Okay, speaking of perspective, let's talk about Mr. McGregor, the 93-year-old man with Parkinson's disease, the one with the severe tilt.
Ah, yes. His case is a perfect example of how our brains can sometimes trick us into perceiving the world in the distorted way.
Parkinson's disease affects balance and coordination, right?
It often does, yes. And Mr. McGregor had developed this tilt so severe that he was leaning at an alarming angle, but he wasn't aware of it. He felt perfectly upright.
He was leaning, but he felt straight.
Yes, it was like his brain had created this new normal for him, even though it was clearly not aligned with reality.
Wow. So how did Sachs help him?
He had this brilliant idea. He videotaped Mr. McGregor walking and then played it back to him. And when Mr. McGregor saw himself on the screen,
He must have been shocked.
he was. He was finally able to see what everyone else was seeing. But even then, he couldn't feel the tilt. It shows how powerful our internal sense of self can be, even when it contradicts external evidence.
It makes you think about all the ways our brains might be filtering or distorting our perceptions without us even knowing it.
It's a bit unsettling, isn't it? But also kind of amazing that our brains are capable of creating these alternate realities.
It really is. So in a way, Mr. McGregor's reality was different from everyone else's.
It was. And it speaks to the incredible plasticity of the brain, its ability to adapt, to rewire itself, even in the face of neurological challenges.
And it also highlights the importance of having, multiple perspectives. It was only by seeing himself from a different vantage point that Mr. McGregor was able to grasp the reality of the situation.
It reminds us that we all have our own unique perspectives, shaped by our experiences and our neurology, and that being open to other viewpoints can help us see the world in new and often surprising ways.
Okay, so let's shift gears again, this time to a case that explores the intersection of creativity and, neurological difference.
Yep.
The story of Jose, a man with autism and epilepsy. It's incredibly moving and insightful.
Autism is a developmental disorder that can affect social interaction, communication, and behavior. And Jose, he had been nonverbal for many years, unable to express himself through language.
But he had this incredible talent, right?
He did, for drawing. Sachs describes his drawings as incredibly detailed, realistic, almost photographic in quality.
Wow, so art became his language.
In a way, yes. It was as if drawing was his way of communicating his unique perspective on the world.
That's beautiful. And what's even more remarkable is that as Jose continued to draw,
Yes.
he began to communicate more. through gestures, and eventually even words.
It was like art unlocked a part of his brain that had been dormant. It suggests that for Jose, art wasn't just a hobby. It was a pathway to communication, to connection. It reminds us that there are many different ways of being in the world, many different ways of expressing oneself.
It makes you wonder if we're sometimes too quick to label people as disabled when they might simply be differently abled.
I agree. And it highlights the importance of providing opportunities for people with neurological differences to express themselves, to find their own unique paths to fulfillment.
All right, one last case before we wrap up this incredible journey into the neurology of identity. The story of John and Michael, twin brothers who had severe intellectual disabilities, but
But
they possessed this extraordinary ability with numbers.
yes. They were what's often called idiot savants, individuals who have significant cognitive challenges in some areas, but demonstrate exceptional abilities in others.
And in their case, it was numbers. These twins could perform these amazing feats of calculation. Like, they could instantly tell you the day of the week for any date in history, or identify prime numbers up to tens of thousands of digits.
What's so intriguing is that they seem to have this intuitive understanding of numbers, almost like they could see them as shapes or patterns.
Zach's described watching them exchange six-digit prime numbers back and forth, completely absorbed in their own, well, numerical world.
It's a reminder that intelligence isn't this monolithic thing. There are many different forms of intelligence, and what we consider normal is just one narrow slice of the spectrum.
Their case challenges us to rethink our assumptions about what it means to be intelligent, to appreciate the incredible diversity of the human mind.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that even those who are labeled as disabled can possess unique gifts and perspectives that can enrich our understanding of the world.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder, what do we even mean by intelligence, right? I mean, John and Michael's case shows us there are so many ways of perceiving, of understanding the world.
Absolutely. The human mind is far more complex, more multifaceted than we often give it credit for. What we consider normal is just this tiny little sliver of the vast spectrum of human possibility.
So, as we wrap up this incredible journey into the neurology of identity, let's take a moment to reflect on everything we've learned from these extraordinary cases.
Yeah.
We've encountered people who mistook their wives for hats, felt disembodied, relived vivid memories through seizures.
And found solace and expression in the most unexpected ways.
Exactly. What unites all these stories, though, is the profound insight they offer into this intricate relationship between the brain, the mind, and the human experience. They show us how vulnerable our sense of self can be, how much we rely on the proper functioning of our brains to navigate the world, to make sense of who we are.
It's like Sachs was holding up a mirror to humanity, showing us both the fragility and the resilience of the human spirit.
And what's fascinating is that, even though these are cases of neurological difference, they illuminate something universal about the human condition, don't they?
They do. They force us to confront these fundamental questions about the nature of reality, the self, the meaning of life, questions that we all grapple with, whether we're consciously aware of it or not.
And they invite us to step outside of our own limited perspectives and appreciate the incredible diversity of human experience.
And foster empathy, right? To approach those who are different from us with understanding, with compassion, recognizing that we all share a common humanity despite our unique neurology.
I think what strikes me most is how these cases challenge our assumptions about what it means to be, well, normal.
Normal?
What is normal anyway?
Right. It seems like normal is just a label we put on a very narrow range of human experience. Exactly. And when we broaden our definition of what's possible, when we embrace the full spectrum of human neurodiversity,
Then what?
we open ourselves up to a world of extraordinary potential and understanding.
I love that. So as we conclude this deep dive, I'm left with this sense of awe and wonder at the mysteries of the human brain. And also this renewed appreciation for the resilience of the human spirit and the infinite possibilities that lie within each of us.
Infinite possibilities. I like that.
Me too. And I hope you are too.